Okay, so we're back with part 3, and we're getting close to making the scales, but one of the first things you got to do now is you got to mark a lateral line. Now most fish have a lateral line, so this is not inconsistent with what you see out there in real life. And you put on your tape, roughly centered here. Now I'm going to cut, I always cut on the right hand side of the tape because I'm right-handed. So, and then you make a small loop, and this edge should be roughly in the middle of the tail. So what I do is I use my Wahoo knife, which is a great razor blade knife, and I've taken the tip, I've marked it as well, I've taken the tip and I've rounded it over. Now I'm going to make this mark. I don't want to cut through it, I just want to mark it. So you press firmly, but you don't put so much pressure that you can actually cram all the way through it. So you're very careful to follow the tape. And you wind up with this beautiful lateral line. Now let's take a look at what we're trying to do. So this same lure, I guess this would be a better side to show you. We're going to put angled depressions in the aluminum tape, full length, all the way across the entire aluminum tape, and then along the back we're going to put half impressions. And this is one style of scales that you can put on. I've also got an example of a second style. This style, I put in scales both top along the shoulder and along the back, and it's your choice, whatever you like. I really like this one. I think it looks great. The bottom impressions kind of look like ribs, and so that's the one that I'm going to be doing. So what you do is you take your lure that you've just completed and you've put on all the shiny aluminum, and you make yourself a little ruler out of paper. I use the same paper I use for my birthday cards and Christmas cards because it's the right size, and it won't scratch the aluminum. Anything else will scratch the aluminum. So what you do is you have to decide on the angle. So you know that that's not enough and that's too much. So somewhere in the middle is the right amount. So I make my first mark on the aluminum. Now, as it turns out, I measured that angle with a protractor, and it's 20 degrees off the vertical or 70 degrees off the horizontal. So then you kind of decide how far you want your parallel lines to be. And of course, this will determine how big your scales are. And you start doing this. You start scratching them, heading towards the tail. Now, as you go down, it's very common to have your angle start to change a little bit because each line that you make, that you scratch in, is a little bit wrong. So sometimes you'll find that your angle lines become a little less flat or a little less vertical, and you can fix that. And what you do, how you do that is, I'm going to exaggerate this. You make the top of the impression wider than the bottom one, and in 2 or 3 impressions, you can get back to where you want to be. And and most of all, it's not that critical. Now, when you get to the tail, if you're too vertical, it makes the scales and the tail look a little funny. So I kind of like to stop every once in a while and kind of decide how I'm doing. So I keep going along with this. This is the half of the scale making that is the easy part. It's easy on the eyes, and nothing is horribly straight. Sometimes the paper will bunch up a little bit and it'll be a little bit cockeyed, but generally it's not too bad. So rather than me finishing it all the way to the tail, I'm going to do this part now. This part is a little different because I always mark it kind of in the middle of the shoulder, so at some point in time I've got to come back and go the other direction. You see that one's a little bit wonky, but you know, carry on. And when you finally put the scales in, the little diamonds, there's so much glitter. Anything that's a little cockeyed doesn't really show that much. Now, will it show to a fish? I don't think so, to be honest. Okay, I'm going to go right to the gills, because you got to do a little something different on the gills. Now, some people think big lure, big scales. Yeah, it's really up to you. I think the scales look really good after they've been painted in epoxy, because what happens, the scales kind of peek through. And I think that's a really great look. So we're getting close to the gills now. You see, we got a couple more and then we'll hit the gills. You want to be a little bit careful around the gills. You don't want to leave cut marks over top of the gills. See, now I've got to go over the gills. So I line up top and bottom. So now the top part is just about done, because I can't go any farther on the top, which is fine. I like to have my angle lines kind of start and stop. I don't like to stop them kind of in the middle of nowhere. These ones are a little tougher because you don't have a nice long parallel line to use as a guide. Sometimes I like to make the last line right on the tip of the gill. Kind of hard to do sometimes, but okay. So I haven't totally completed this vertical line. You can see I stop right here, but now I'm going to show you how to do the cross line. Now this is a little bit trickier because you got to have good eyesight for this. So I'll start up here where I normally start, and what I do for this is I determine my angle and I hold the knife like this, and it looks a little bit funny, but it looks it's really solid. And what you do is you come to this joint here where the lateral line crosses the angle line, and you'll make a scratch upward. There you go. That's your first one. Now, as you go down here, you have to be careful. And it's okay to miss them a little bit, but right about now, you've got about 5 hours invested in a lure. And it's very easy to make a really bad line if you have somebody come in who wants to chat with you. So if you have somebody come in, it's best to put your work down, complete your chat, and then go back to this after they've left. Now I like to put on some old-time music and just relax at this. Because for me this is quite stressful. This is hard on my eyes. People might say you can use the magnifier glasses, but well, I don't like to do that. That would mean I'm getting old. Of course I am old, but just another reminder. So you'll do this all the way down to the tail, using that backward approach. So I'm going to do a few more towards the gills, just to show you how to finish this off. And again, the light has to be just right for you to see that crossover properly. And of course the tip has been rounded, so you have to go a little farther than it appears to get the right down to the junction of the two lines. And if you miss one every so often, it's not really that big a deal. I've never ruined a lure because of this, but the other side of it is I would never, well, that's not quite true. I have this kind of scaling on 95% of my lures because I just like it. I think it just makes that lure look like a fish. Now this cardboard ruler you have to change out every once in a while because surprisingly enough, there is wear and tear in it from the blade as you press against it. Okay, now I've run out of the cross areas to guide me, and I have to kind of go my eyeball here. Now the next thing that you'll do, of course, is the other side. I always take a break before I move to the second side. One of the things that people look at naturally is symmetry. So when you put the aluminum on this side, you're going to bring this mark here over to this side using this water-based pen. Same for this side, you're going to bring over. So when you look at this left to right, it looks symmetrical. And making a quality hook, symmetry is important. I don't think it's important for the fish, but I think it's important for the craft. So you can see we're about maybe 2/3 done. And I'm going to end this video right here. So thank you for joining me, and we'll get back to the next steps in just a little bit.